Good morning. If everyone could please take their seats. I just wanted to welcome Schachter to Hollywood. It's wonderful to have you here. Thank you for finding some time to share Torah with us. I also wanted to thank you for your guidance and advice always, but especially over the last 14 months. It's been critical for myself and for our Kehillah and for Kehillas around the world. So thank you for that.
Happy to have the adult ed back and running again. Just continuing what Rabbi Weinstock said, as I was walking across the street, I was thinking that when I took my kids many years ago to the Begin Museum, and they're looking at Menachem Begin and they see this, small old guy, and I was trying to impart to them what a powerhouse he was, that they can't imagine what he did by looking at him now. And I was walking across the street, I was thinking the same thing about you, in that, during what Rabbi Weinstock said about during COVID, you were a powerhouse, you were a superhero. It was so comforting to have somebody to, the Torah says, the Chai behind was a Torah Chaim, and to have someone that was brave with broad shoulders to take us through this, it was really, really very comforting and wonderful. And I just wanted to personally thank you on behalf of, again, like Rabbi Weinstock, me and Hollywood and the world. And it's so nice that you allow yourself to be schlepped here to visit your groupies, your fans in Hollywood. We really appreciate it. And thank you so much for coming in. A big answer for my dad. I spoke with him earlier this morning.
Thank you very much. What happened was that the Rabbinical Council of America had they asked me they gave me a list of questions that some of the Rabbanim had posed, and they had a conference call. So a lot of Rabbanim were listening, but many were not on the conference call. So one of the Rabbanim decided to write up the notes that he had. So some of the younger Rabbanim in the yeshiva were not happy the way it was written up by this rabbi from the RCA, because he didn't fully understand what I said. He said a different opinion. I said my opinion. This young rabbi, the one who wrote it up, was not so young. So he was never a student of mine. So he didn't fully understand what I said when I said the others said. So the younger rabbis in the yeshiva said, this is not going to be accurate. They insisted I should write down what I said. And they're going to put it on. They're going to translate it into English, and they're going to put it online. I don't know how to put things online. I barely know how to use a computer, so I didn't put it online. I didn't know how to access the website where they have all of the stuff there. So this is the younger rabbis in yeshiva. You have to thank them for doing this. I was asked just to tell over some of the issues that came up during the COVID, some of the Shabbat that came. So one of the, let's say, recently before Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, so it was still dangerous to be together with people who had COVID. So people in a lot of the shuls where they were davening on Shabbos and Yom Tov, they were trying to abridge the davening to spend less time together. So in some of the shuls, they would recommend everyone should say Psukkah de Zimra at home and come to shul before Nishmas Kol Chai. So the shul started together in Nishmas Kol Chai, and they would leave out that. The Mir said, leave out whatever you can leave out. They would abridge the whole davening. So when it came Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, so I said, everyone should leave out all the piyutim. You can daven without the piyutim. It's not a real din. It's not a din in our Torah. It's not a din in the Rabbanim. It's only a minyan. So a prominent conservative rabbi attacked me in the newspaper. What do you mean? You're going to leave out the sanitayk? You're going to leave out the chol minim? No, that's the main part of the davening. I thought it was ridiculous. Then after I wrote that, and after I was attacked, then I found out. 200 years ago, during the lifetime of Rabbi Akiva Eger, there was a cholera epidemic. Rabbi Akiva Eger gave the guidelines. They didn't know that you have to have distancing, 6 feet distancing. Rabbi Akiva Eger said every other seat in the shul should be empty, should be vacant. And only the odd number seat should be taken, the even number seats should be empty. Whoever comes to shul, every seat was taken. So whoever comes to shul on Rosh Hashanah can't come on Yom Kippur. So you come either 2 days Rosh Hashanah or you come on Yom Kippur. You can't come on both days. The rabbis came on both days, but the Balbatim, you can only come on one or the other. They had to leave out all the piyutim, just say the bare minimum. I didn't even know Rabbi Akiva Eger said like that, but that's a common sense dictates like that. That was ridiculous to say that the piyutim are more important than the davening. One of my close friends, I learned with a real Sephardi, a couple of days a week. He drives in from Flatbush and he learns with me B'charus. So on Purim, when the whole thing began in New York, so they, by real Sephardim, they kiss each other, hug each other. So he was one of the first to get COVID. He was half dead. And it's a nest that he's still alive, and he's still not back to himself, still didn't fully recover. He's much younger than me, but he still didn't fully recover. So he was sick in the hospital in New York City, in Flatbush. He was sick in the hospital on Pesach, after the first Purim last year. So in the hospital, they had written down on the chart for the patient that the wife is not. They didn't allow any visitors in the hospital because they would transmit the sickness. So his wife couldn't visit him. So the maximum she could do is call on the telephone. So they had written down on this chart that he's an Orthodox Jew, and the wife is not going to call on 2 days Yom on Shabbos. And the hospitals were so overcrowded, they couldn't take care of all of the patients. And the Chevra Kadisha said that many of the Jewish patients who died, and they took care of the Kfura, many of them didn't get a stitch of service in the hospital. They didn't treat them at all. They did nothing for them. So if the wife is not going to call on the phone, they certainly won't do anything for them. So I called the wife and I insisted she has to call every day, including Shabbos and Yom Tov. It's not permissible to talk on the telephone on Shabbos, but it's clearly not a biblical violation, it's a rabbinical violation. And this situation is mamish and suffix akanas nefashos. I insisted that she must call every day, Shabbos and Yom Tov, at least once a day, to ask how's my husband, to make sure that they're going to treat him, because they weren't treating all the patients. They were only treating some of them. They were overburdened. So that's one of the things that I wrote up. And people called me and they told me that they thanked me. They said I saved the life of their parents. If they wouldn't have called on Shabbos and Yom Tov, they would have just ignored them. They would have let them die. In the middle of this epidemic, a lot of people fell in love and they got married. I don't know how they dated. so they got married. So a lot of times people were afraid to have a minyan. It was against the law to have 10 people gathered together. So the shiloh was, can you have a wedding without a minyan? So strictly speaking, there are two parts to every wedding ceremony. There's the erison and there's the nisuin. The erison is what we call kiddushin. When the chassan says hariyat and he gives the ring. So the rabbi says the bracha, and chassan has a simple mind, the kala has a sit, and then that's like the bracha before you put on the tefillin, bracha before you put on the talis. That's the bracha before you get married. You're about to perform a mitzvah getting married. So then the chassan says hariyat and kodeshesli, he gives the ring. So that bracha, strictly speaking, does not really need a minyan. The minyan is that we try to get a minyan for birchas erison. But if it's too difficult, you can have erison, you can have kiddushin without a minyan. In the days of the Tanakh, in the days of the Gemara, to the days of the Gaonim were after the days of the Gemara, before the days of Rashi and Texas. In the days of the Gemara, there was a year pause in between the erison and the nisuin. The girl would be married to the husband, she would be an Eshes, but she would still be living by her parents. So the chassan is not permitted to live with the kala until after you have nisuin. Nisuin would take a year later. In fact, the practice would be they would wait a year, then they would get married the first Wednesday after the year. Mishnah says in the beginning of Ksubas, those who remember, the opening Mishnah says, Psula Nisas Liyom Haravi, if the girl is getting married for the first time. So the Gemara gives a whole explanation why the Chachamim made a takana that the wedding should be on Wednesday. That's why in Yiddish there's a famous expression. It takes a person forever, it takes him a year on a Wednesday. Yeah. That's where it comes from. The girl wants to get married already. He gave her a ring and said, hurry up with the dishes. But she wants to live with her husband, so they have to make nisuin. So they give him up until a year and the Wednesday following the year, and then he has to make nisuin. If he doesn't do the chuppah by the year and the Wednesday, then he has to start supporting the girl. Calls they're only erison. The husband is not mechuyev to support her. After nisuin, he has to mechuyev sheks hisviyan to support. So in the days of the Goyim, they decided that that's not a smart idea, so they moved up the nisuin. Should be right after the erison. But since in the days of the Gemara there was a long pause, there was a year in between, So the Rabbi Tam, that was Rashi's grandson, Rabbi Tam introduced that you should have some hafsaka, you should have some pause in between to represent the idea that in the days of the Gemara there was a year's pause in between. Rabbi Tam introduced that you should read the Ksuba. Reading the Ksuba is supposed to slow down. You're supposed to read it slowly, not quickly. A lot of the Rabbanim, when it comes to Chuppah, they run through the Ksuba very, very briefly, quickly. I remember Ablazer Silva from Cincinnati, when he would read a Ksuba, so it would be a dramatic presentation. He would read slowly, and if someone would talk, he would stop reading the Ksuba, then he would start reading to the beginning. You have to listen to the whole Ksuba. When he's reading, you have to listen. And if the rabbi wants to hold the sermon, the best time to hold the sermon is over there, because he should. Rabbi Tam introduced, you should have a pause. It's not going to be a Yom et mitzvah. It's not going to be the year with the Wednesday, but if you want to have a chazan sing a nigun, so the best time to sing a nigun is over there, in between. And many have the practice that you break the glass in between the areas, and then they do it. Most places the practice is the chazan breaks the glass after everything is over. But it says in the commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch that after you say the brachas under the chuppah, the 7 brachas, that's called Shabbat brachas under the chuppah, you should rush the chazan kala to the yichud room, because the brachas, the 7 brachas, the Shabbat brachas go under Nisuin, and there are different opinions what constitutes Nisuin. So the one opinion is standing under the canopy, that's Nisuin. The Rambam's opinion is standing under the canopy is meaningless, it's the yichud. So the commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch say you should rush them. Maharil has an expression. You rush the chazan kala to the yichud room, you shouldn't have too long a pause. Now it takes forever till you go from the brachas under the chuppah to the yichud room. The photographer makes you stand there, and everybody's kissing each other, and then the boys are dancing. They don't let the chazan kala go. You're supposed to go quickly to the yichud room. So the Gemara learns out from Sukkin that the 7 brachas, the birchas nisuin, requires a minyan. If you don't have 10 men, you can't recite the birchas nisuin. So the question is, what if you don't have 10 men? So you don't say the birchas nisuin. So you can't have a chuppah. What do you say? No, you have the chuppah, and you don't have the brachas, and they're allowed to live together. You can have the chuppah without a minyan. So the Gemara has an expression, the famous line, kala v'loy bracha asur l'bayla kadina. If chazan kala are married, but they didn't say the bracha, she's not allowed to live with her husband. You take that literally, kala v'loy bracha. They didn't say that. They didn't recite the birchas nisuin. It means kala v'lo nisuin. If you didn't do nisuin, then she's not allowed to live with her husband. But if you had nisuin, it's still under the chuppah. They went to the yichud, just didn't have a minyan. So you didn't say the birchas nisuin. So that's a big dispute. You look in the commentaries on the page in the Benezer, so the Bishmur, it's a standard commentary. So the Bishmur quotes the dispute, but it's a little not fair. The only Rishon who takes a stand on this is the Rashba. So the Rashba says l'chumra, that it's not, you can't have nisuin without a bracha. You have to have a minyan. If you don't have a minyan, you can't say the birchas nisuin. The girl is not allowed to live with the husband. And the Achrayim didn't know this Rashba. So the Achrayim said on their own that the Gemara's lashon is not to be taken with the kala v'lo nisuin. You can have nisuin without a minyan. So I would have thought that if it's a dispute between the Rashba, one of the Rishonim, and the Achrayim didn't have the Rashba, I would have thought that we should pass them like the Rashba. But I looked a little bit. So there used to be a prominent Talmid Chacham in England, dying Grosnas, labeled Grosnas. He learned in yeshiva together with Rabbi Gerelik, all the rabbis that we know from YU. He learned in Radin by the Chavetz Chaim. He was a Levi. He said, he once told me, Chavetz Chaim was nice to him. He always had him wash his hands. Chavetz Chaim was a kohen. So they have a Levi wash the hands of the kohen. So the Chaim's, he was a Yekek from Germany. So there were very few Yekkes learned in Eastern Europe and Litvish yeshivas. And so the Chavetz Chaim wanted to be Mekarben, so he had him always wash his hands, but he was not a good. They didn't learn Baruch Ber. He has the modern style tshuvas, yeshivish tshuvas. He has a tshuva on the topic. He paskins la'alacha against the Rashba. Rav Tuvia Goldstein was a prominent Talmid Chacham in New York. He used to live in the same building as Rav Moshe Feinstein. He used to give beautiful shiurim, and his Talmidim brought up 3 volumes so far, beautiful shiurim. He also has like that. He quotes Poskim and say Halacha L'Maisa. In Europe, there were little villages where they didn't even have a minyan of Jewish people, period. So that couples got married. So they pass on halacha l'maisa that you can have nisuin without a minyan. You just don't say the birchas nisuin. So there was some of the couples followed that psak that you can have a chuppah. The kiddushin we know you can say harayat and say the birchas herisim before you say harayat without a minyan. There's a shas hamchak, so there is, because they're afraid because of the COVID, they're afraid to have a minyan. But even the birchas nisuin, where it's the minyan is ma'akev, you can't recite the birchas nisuin, the Shabbat brachas without a minyan. So you can have the chuppah without the birchas nisuin. They're permitted to live together. That's the psak halacha l'maisa. Because for quite a while people couldn't be together, so the shaila was apparently in Lakewood, in Flatbush, you have a lot of times buildings are constructed in such a way that the porches are near each other. So if you have 5 men on one porch, 5 men on another porch, they're pretty close with each other. They can see each other. Does that constitute a minyan? So the simple reading of the Gemara in Psachim is a din in Chumash when it comes to eating Korban Pesach. Thank you. There is a pasuk in Chumash that when it comes to Korban Pesach, it speaks that a person beginning to eat his Korban Pesach in one building wants to continue in a different building. So the Gemara there discusses what's the din for a minyan. So the simple reading of the Gemara himself is that in order to constitute a minyan, you have to have 10 people in one room. What if, let's say, the soldiers in the army, they're not in a room, they're on a field. So how close do they have to be? So that's a shayla. That's a shayla. So they're thinking about that also. Chazon Ish used to say they have to be within Shiva Mama B'Shirai. He borrowed a concept in Hilchas when you're figuring out the city limits. Chum Shabbos. So if you have houses within 70 amos to each other, it's considered a hemshech of the city. So the Chazon Ish held out the Pashup Pshat in what Shiva Mama B'Shirai goes on buildings being mitzvah to each other. It does go on people. Chazon Ish thought that applies to soldiers in the army also. The people are near each other, but if they're very far apart from each other, they're not going to starve from it. So the simple reading of the Gemara is that you have to have 10 people in the same room. And if you have 5 people in one room, 5 people in another room, you don't have a minyan. So the issue is, there's a Mishnah in Brachas. The Mishnah says, if you want to bench mezuzah, so if you have 3 people, you have 3 men or more, you can have 3 women also. If you have 3 people, then you say Baruch Shalcham Mushalah. If you have 10 men or more, then you say Baruch Shalcham Mushalah. So the simple reading of the Mishnah sounds like it says if you have 5 people in one room, 5 people in another room, some of these people see some of the other people, that it constitutes tziruf, they're combined together to constitute a minyan, and you can say Baruch Shalcham Mushalah. So the question is, maybe that's only with respect to bench and mezuzah, because bench and mezuzah is not really a davar shebikdusha, but the Mishnah says that a davar shebikdusha, to say kaddish kedusha baruch and need a minyan, that's based on a different idea. The Gemara says, let's say for duchanim, you have to have a minyan. If you don't have a minyan, you can't do it. That's not a davar shebikdusha. That's a separate din that you need a minyan. Learn that from a pasuk. So the Gemara says that you want to bench mezuzah and baruch and you need 10. The Gemara doesn't say because it's davar shebikdusha. The Gemara says because lavar achara, it's not their achara, it's the mention shem shamayim if you have less than asar. But for the Gemara would appear it's not a davar shebikdusha. So the Rachid pointed out in Europe it used to be different in Hagi. When you bench mezuzah ba'asara, if you have 10, so by the yekas when they say baruch hakenu, they stand up literally. They stand up like this. By the non-yekas, a lot of people just lift themselves up a little bit. And by the real lidfaks, they don't stand up at all because they hold it's not a davar shebikdusha. See, it's not a davar shebikdusha. That's the question. Just because the Mishnah says if they have 5 people in one room, 5 people in another room, some see some of the other people, they combine together to bench mezuzah. Maybe that doesn't apply to davar shebikdusha, because davar shebikdusha, the simple reading of the Gemara himself means you need all the 10 people in one room. So there's a Chuvas HaRashba that's quoted in the Mishnah Torah. Chuvas HaRashba writes, Ulai, perhaps, just like the din Miktsas and Raya Me'elu Esela applies to mezuzah, maybe it applies also to Chazaras Hashatz and Kaddish Kedusha and Baruch. So that's a suffix. So the different parts of the Mishnah Berurah were written. Here it becomes, a little history becomes relevant. The different parts of the Mishnah Berurah were written by different members of the Chafetz Chaim's family. Chafetz Chaim was the general editor of the Mishnah Berurah. It's clear those who study Mishnah Berurah will see. Mishnah Berurah usually is sold in 6 volumes. So the first volume of the Mishnah Berurah is not at all as strong as the other volumes. You look in the Dir Halacha, the Chafetz Chaim was a quiet man, but he made a revolution. On every page in the Shulchan Aruch, he came up with a different psak, the way the traditional psak was, based on the new manuscripts that were printed during his lifetime, based on the new Svarim. I don't even know how he got these. The Maimon Mordechai was printed in France. How did he get it? He did it in Polish. How did the Chafetz Chaim get it? And he had Svarim printed in other countries. It was hot off the press. And he reversed the Psak HaMekubal for centuries. I didn't have a Mishnah Berurah till a few years after I was married. My wife bought me a birthday present. And until then, my father, how did we figure out a Psak? You learn the Shulchan Aruch, the Magen Avraham, the Matzah Shekel, and the Prima God, and they come up with a Psak. Then the Mishnah Berurah comes and he reverses the Psak HaMekubal, and not on every page in the Shulchan. So the first section of the Mishnah Berurah is not as strong as the rest. The other volumes are much stronger because they were written by different people. And if you look at the Mishnah Berurah, Hilchas Sukkah, it's like a Minchas Chinuch. A lot of times he has a whole pilpul. It's not the Geh Halacha L'maisi. It's just giving a pilpul on the Gemara. It's clear. It's interesting just historically. The communist government confiscated many Svarim from the Lubavitcher libraries in different places in Europe. And Lubavitch requested for many years from the Russian government they should please return all of the stolen Svarim, all the borrowed Svarim. They should give it back to Lubavitch. So after many years of requesting, they gave them back, but they gave them back more than they asked for. So they gave back things that never belonged to Lubavitch. So they included 770 Eastern Parkway. What they have is the manuscript of the Mishnah Berurah, the original manuscript that was sent to the printer. And it's written in different handwritings, in different colors ink. And they know which is the Chafetz Chaim's handwriting. They said the Chafetz Chaim here and there. Added one line at the end of a long pilpul. He added one line with another mark and what the din should be. But it wasn't written. Most of it was not written by I don't know if anything was written by the Chafetz Chaim. It's written by different members of the family. Those of you who have the 3 volumes of the Kol Kisvei Chafetz Chaim, so they have their different books written by the Chafetz Chaim. Then you have a biography of the Chafetz Chaim written by one of the sons of the Chafetz Chaim. So he writes in the biography, I wrote this section in the Mishnah Berurah, my uncle wrote the other section, and that's why there's a contradiction, because I passed him like this, and my uncle passed him like that. He tells him which topic, whether you have to wait for the Shiur on the 3 Shabbos. If a Jew did malach, Mar talks about waiting for the Shiur. If a non-Jew does malach on Shabbos, but if a Jew, so that's a dispute between Rashi and Tosfos. And he says there are many other contradictions. There are many contradictions between the different volumes of the Mishnah Berurah, because each section was written by somebody else. So here, there's a major contradiction between the Mishnah Berurah, volume 1 and volume 2. In volume 1, he basically just quotes what it says in the Shari Tshuva next to the Behemoth. That if the situation is going to go on for a couple of weeks, and the people are not going to have a minyan because you can't gather together, it's the same thing. There was an epidemic in Italy, and it was in the port cities, and people were coming from other places, and they were going to pass the sickness to others, so they had a quarantine. They had a quarantine for a couple of weeks, so that you couldn't have 10 people together, because they were coming with different sicknesses from different countries. So they had 5 people in one location, 5 people in another location, but they could talk to each other. They could see each other, they could talk to each other. Can you be mitzvah of them or not? So the Shari Tshuva next to the Behemoth quotes this from the Chido. Chido was a world traveler. He used to be a Meshulach to raise money for the Yishuv in Eretz Yisrael in the 1700s. So the Chido Paskins Halacha L'maaseh, it was going to be drawn out for a couple of weeks. It's going to be missing Chazar Shashatz, Kadosh Kedusha, Baruch Hu, Kriyas HaTorah, everything. Then it's Kedai to be Mekel, to be lenient, to follow that suffix of the Rashba. Maybe they can be Mitzareh from one city, from one room to the other. If Mitzvah and Roy Me'el say, that's what it says in the Mishnah Berurah Chelik Aleph. In Chelik Beis, volume 2 of the Mishnah Berurah, where he talks about Benjamin Mezuzah, the original din, he throws out the whole din. He says even by Benjamin Mezuzah it's not true. He quotes that the Dom Goyen has a commentary on the Mishnah. The Vilna Gaon says that Mishnah, that if some people see each other, they can be mitzvah together. Doesn't mean 5 and 5. It means 10 and 10. There are 10 people in that room. There are 10 people in the other room. If they want, they can bench Mezuzah with themselves. They don't need the other 10. If they want, they can. So what's the Chiddush? Chiddush is because in the days of the Gemara, the practice was, that's the Hikar, when you bench Mezuzah, only the one who benches Mezuzah says the whole benching to the end. Everybody says Amen. The Shulchan Aruch recommends that everybody should bench along. But the Shulchan Aruch quotes it from the later Rishonim because it's hard to concentrate. A Kiddush is short, so when one person says Kiddush, everybody says Amen. Not so long. And Hamotzi Lechem and Haaretz, not so long, so we can concentrate. But the benching is a couple of pages benching, so we're afraid that people may not be concentrating on the one who's Mizanim, saying all benches. So that's why the recommendation of Shulchan Aruch is everybody should bench a little. But in the days of the Gemara, the days of the Tanaim, that was not the practice. Only one person would bench. So that's the question. If you have 10 people in one room, 10 people in the other room, and each group can bench Mezuzah, but they want to bench Mezuzah together. So one of the people in this group is going to say out loud the whole benching. Can the other people be Yotzei? If you're not benching Mezuzah, if they're not mitzvah from Mezuzah, then you can't be Motzei. You don't allow Shemei Kohen on benching. Only if it's in the form of Mezuzah. So then the Mishnah says if some of them see each other, then you can be mitzvah. But if they have 5 and 5, the Vilna Gaon says the whole din in the Mishnah doesn't apply. So then the Mishnah Berurah writes, he found one of the new Rishonim that was just printed during his lifetime. One of the Rishonim says like the Vilna Gaon, and he thinks we should follow the Vilna Gaon. He threw out the whole din by benching Mezuzah. He denies the whole din by benching Mezuzah, then you can't be mitzvah 5 and 5. So by davening Chazaras Hashem Meshurna. So I thought that was not right. I thought that this practice that they would say 5 people from one room, 5 people from the other room for Chazaras Hashatz, for Kriyas Hatah, I thought it was not right at all. Based on the Mishnah Berurah in Chelik Betz. He did away with the whole thing by pension, so certainly by davening. For sure, I thought it was not. In many of the shuls, they still have like that now. Many of the shuls, they're afraid to have people, in yeshiva they have a plastic separation between the Balkairi and the one who gets the Aliyot. But that's now. And now they're probably going to take down because all the students already have been vaccinated. So they're probably going to take down that plastic separation. But at the beginning, people were concerned. So it's not proper that I should sit in my seat in the corner and the Balkairi is over here. I'll say the bracha without looking in the Sefer Torah at all. The chatchila, the din is that a person who gets an Aliyah should read along. In the days of the Gemara, the one who got the Aliyah would lane. He would lane his parsha. And then some people knew how to lane, and other people would kill the truck, and they would kill the ivrit, and you wouldn't be able to the Kriyas Hatah. So some of the people would be laning their own Aliyah because they knew how to lane. Other people didn't know how to lane, so you had a Balkairi lane for them. So some people, half of the people would be embarrassed, they'd be humiliated. All the other people know how to lane on their own, and I have to rely on the Balkairi. So they made a takana that no one should lane on his own. You have a Balkairi lane for everybody. This is based on the Mishnah Bikurim. Many people study Bikurim of Shavuos. That the Mishnah says the Tchila originally in the days of the Beis Hamikdash, the farmers who brought the Bikurim to the Beis Hamikdash would rattle off Arami Avi Ravi. The people wouldn't know it by heart, so they would have a chart. But the chart didn't spell out the whole Arami Avi Ravi. It was written in Russian text. Aleph, 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 Vav, Mem. Arami, Avi, Avi, Vayered, Mitzrayim. So that's not bad. The first pasuk I can figure out also. Then Vayod Hashem said, yeah. So you have to know how to figure out the Rashi text. So many of the farmers could not figure out what in the world that Rashi text was all about. So those who knew how to figure it out said Arami, Avi, Avi on their own. Those who didn't have someone else say for them. That would be Motzei them, which are that kind of. So the Mishnah says, Nimnu Milahavi. I should travel a half a day to Yerushalayim. I should travel 2 days to Yerushalayim from Kiryat Shmona to bring my Bikurim and to be humiliated. What do I need the whole thing for? So they stop bringing Bikurim. They don't want to go to the Beis Hamikdash. So the Chachamim, this man, Beis Hamikdash made a takana. We don't allow anybody to say Zamar Arami Avidavi. You have to have someone say it for you. So it's based on that. that the minhag was introduced in the days of the Goyim. Nobody lanes his own parsha. We always have a Balkari lane. So Leitchik thought that it's not proper even that a bar mitzvah bacher. Everybody knows he's a bar mitzvah that he prepared. So he said bar mitzvah bacher is not allowed to lane. For sure, if you just give him maftir and he's going to lay maftir, that for sure is not right. But even he's going to lay the whole sedra, including maftir. He said the minhag is the Balkari only gets an aliyah by the Torah. That's the way he read the Shulchan. The Balkari never gets in his own aliyah. He only gets, if he's laying, he only gets an aliyah by the Torah. Because people feel uncomfortable. I get an aliyah, and the Balkari lays, Yak Hashem Hashachafetz. It sounds as if the Balkari is cursing the one who gets the aliyah. So the minhag developed that the Balkari gets the aliyah by the Torah. The rest of the year he doesn't get the aliyah. That's a Rav Soloveitchik thought. He said the bar mitzvah bacher shouldn't get an aliyah. I have one daughter, I have 9 children. So one of my daughters has 2 sets of twin boys. She has 2 single girls in between, 2 boys, and then she has 2 single girls. When the twins became bar mitzvah on the same Shabbos, so they divided the Seder in half. So one of them read the first half, one of them read the second half. So one who read the first half, his brother got an aliyah when he was late. The other one read the second half, so the first one got an aliyah then. Rather than have each one read his own part that he's getting an aliyah. So they just thought the Balkari should never get his own aliyah. So each one read half a sedra, and he gave the other brother an aliyah. Okay. So so there was a period of time. So in the days of the Tanaim, one who got the aliyah would lane. In the days of the Goyim, they introduced this institution that you have a Balkari lane for everybody. So strictly speaking, in Shulchan Aruch, they quote from the Rosh that the one who gets the aliyah should really lane along with the Balkari. What if he's blind? What if he can't lane along? What if he doesn't know how to read? Has no Nakudas there? What if he's not able? He does know that script. It's a different. The Oisius and the Aleph base is different. Shiur is different. So strictly speaking, even a blind person can get an aliyah also. So if a blind person gets an aliyah, doesn't have to be able to read. So why can't he sit in the back of the shul and say, and then the Balkari will lay there? So that we don't allow. At least he has to walk up to the bima and has to look in the Sefer Torah. If he's not even walking up, it's not. So in this case, where in the beginning people were afraid to transmit the sickness, so they didn't want people to walk up to get the aliyah. So in Shulchan Aruch, they have the following thing. In the days when people used to lay their own aliyah, days of the Tanaim, when every person got an aliyah was laying on his own. So what if there's only one person in the shul who knows how to lay? So it says in the Tosefta, that's from the days of that, it says in the Tosefta, he gets all the 7 aliyahs. So he says, the days of the Tanaim, they only said a bracha before the first aliyah, Shabbat Habana, and then they said a bracha at the end of the last aliyah. But after the days of the Tanaim, the days of Rabbi Shmuel in Bavel, so they introduced that every aliyah you say bracha before and after. So in Shulchan Aruch it says, if there's only one person who knows how to lane, no one else knows how to lane, so he should say the bracha before. He should lane, say bracha shenasan lanu, then he says bracha Hashem Amrat. Gets all the 7 aliyahs. He says the bracha before and after. So many of the shuls, they were doing that. He said all the brachas before and after. Remember Rabbi Simcha Cook, once speaking for the children in the NCSY program, they used to get him to speak every so often. He's a very fascinating speaker, very pleasant speaker. So he told us about an incident before they gave away Gaza to Hamas. That was a major mistake that the government made. So before that time, so it was still under the control of the Israelis. So there were 2 boys from the Hesder program who were there in the army in Gaza. They wanted to go back to the yeshiva for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. So the commanding officer said, no, we need them to be there Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. So they're very disappointed, but they had no choice. After Yom Kippur, they were so excited. They said this was the best Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur they ever had in their lives. So they called up Rabbi Simcha Cook and they were asking him, what can they do? They told, it turned out like this. They bought a lot of yarmulkes. They went to a Judaicus and they bought a lot of yarmulkes, bought a lot of arbacampus, and they brought it there to the army base in Rosh Hashanah. Many of the soldiers were secular, but they were in the middle of it. Was dangerous there. There was a war. Also, the boys wanted to go to mikveh on Erev Rosh Hashanah, Erev Yom Kippur. So they had a choice. Either they go by helicopter at night. so they won't be able to shoot it down. Or they go by tank in the daytime. So the Israeli army gave them permission to use a tank in the daytime in order to go to mikveh. He said, what army in the world would allow the soldiers to use a tank in the daytime just to go to mikveh? So they brought, when they came Rosh Hashanah, they brought Arba Campus with the yarmulkes. So all the boys grabbed. They didn't know what it was, but they knew it was something religious. Everybody grabbed an Arba Campus. They knew you wear it. And they didn't know what bracha he said. Everybody wore. Then it came, they were going to lay Kriyas HaTorah. So they called Rabbi Cook and they asked him, they said, okay, if one of the boys takes all the aliyahs. So he said, yeah. He said they were calling up people to the Torah. The soldier, the second soldier would stand there. And the boy who was the Balkari would say the bracha, he would say the aliyah, he would say the bracha. Afterwards, they made him Mishaberach for the other guy. He didn't say anything, but they didn't know how to say brachas. They were second, they know how to read Hebrew, but they wouldn't know Bima Estes. So the one boy said all the brachas. He said they never had such a Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur experience all the years that they learned in the yeshiva. They felt that there was more Yerei Shamayim over here. The boys were so interested. So that's what a lot of shuls did. They had the Balkari take all the 7 aliyahs. Some shul enough, they have the following bid. What happens? We have to practice that we get on Shabbos, we give 7 aliyahs, and then we say Chatzi Kaddish, and then you give maftir to someone else. Strictly speaking, the Gemara has a dispute. Strictly speaking, we pasken that the maftir can be the last aliyah, the 7th. You don't need 7 plus maftir. Give 7 aliyahs, and the 7th one, the last one, got the last aliyah. Says the Haftarah afterwards. Because there was one opinion in the days of the Gemara that the maftir has to be separate from the 7 aliyahs, so the Balei HaTosha say, the Rabbi Tam says in Tosha, our practice is, we want to satisfy all the opinions. So we make a hisofim every Shabbos, every Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur, we give Shabbos, you give 7 aliyahs. Yom we give 6 aliyahs. Yom Kippur, you give 6 aliyahs. Yom we give 5 aliyahs. Rosh Chodesh Chalaman, you give 4 aliyahs. The more important the day is, the more aliyahs you have. So on Shabbos, we give 7 aliyahs plus maftir. On Yom Kippur, you give 6 aliyahs plus maftir. But really, strictly speaking, the 6th aliyah could really have said the maftir. We want to satisfy all the opinions, so we make a hisofa. It only makes sense to make a hisofa to share the wealth with others. Instead of only 6 people getting aliyahs on Yom Kippur, you give an extra person. But if one person is taking all the 7 aliyahs on Shabbos, he's taking 8 aliyah. Why should he make a hisofa? Hisofa is going to give a hisofa to another person. I got all the 7 aliyahs, then they're going to make another hisofa. I should get 8 aliyahs. It doesn't make any sense. So under the circumstances in a lot of shuls, some of the shuls are still doing like that. Some of the shuls in Manhattan, they don't give aliyahs. The Balkari still takes all the 7 aliyahs. So if he's taking all the 7, he's saying all the brachas, taking all the 7 aliyahs. You shouldn't say Chatzi Kaddish. He gets 7 aliyahs, and then he says the Haftarah right after the last aliyah. After he finishes the bracha after the Haftarah, then he says the Chatzi Kaddish. That says in the commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch. So it rarely comes up. In a normal year, it rarely comes up. It came up in yeshiva once. I remember it was Parshas Vayikra, and they had, in the middle of Shvi, they found a mistake in the Sefer Torah. There was an aleph instead of an ayin, an obvious mistake, absolute misspelling of a word. So the din is a b'di'evet, if you learn from a pasuk of Sefer Torah, the Rama wrote in the Tshuva that you can learn l'hatchila from a pasuk of Sefer Torah. During the Second World War, the Jewish Welfare Board, the JWB was controlled by the Reform and the Conservative. So they sent out psukim, they sent out the halacha l'maisa psukim for the chaplains, for the Jewish chaplains. So they quoted the Tshuva of the Rambam that you can learn Kriyas HaTorah from a printed chumash. You don't need a kosher sefer. That's what the Rambam wrote in the Tshuva. When the Rambam wrote his sefer Mishnah Torah, he changed his mind because the Mishnah quotes the Tshuva Sarajma. The Rambam, when he wrote his sefer Psak, changed his mind and he said you have to have a kosher sefer Torah for Kriyas HaTorah. But for the Ebed, let's say you're laying the half of the sedra, and then you find a mistake. So you put away the sefer Torah, take out a kosher sefer Torah, you have to start all over again. So the Beis Yosef quotes from his Rebbe, from the Mari Beirav, that in the end we rely on the Tshuva Sarah, that whatever you laid before you, you don't have to lay it over again. So what happens if you find a mistake in Shvi? So there was only one pasuk left, 1 or 2 psukim left. So you don't stop in the middle. So they finished Shvi till the end. They finished the whole Sedra. So the Magen Avraham says, the commentary says, you don't make a whole Tararab just in order to make a Haisafim. So you tell Shvi, he's going to be the mafter. They had already told someone before he's going to be mafter. So you had to tell him, sorry, we're not going to give you a mafter. The one who got Shvi is going to say the mafter. But instead of saying the Chatzi Kaddish, right after the Shvi was over, the one who got Shvi said the Haftarah. And after he finished the brachas after, then he said the Chatzi Kaddish. So we had in the yeshiva once, Allah HaMaisi came up. It's a din in Shulchan Aruch. I wouldn't have known this din. Who would have? But there was one year where Rav Soloveitchik gave Shiur Machilchas Kriyas HaTorah and Tzitzis himself. So I was lucky. I was there that year. So we learned that din from the Shulchan Aruch. So that's the psak now. Some of the shuls in Manhattan are still doing like that. The Balkari gets all the 7 aliyahs. They don't make a hisaf. It doesn't make sense. He already hogged all the 7 aliyahs. You got to give him 8 aliyahs. You don't make an extra aliyah. If you're going to share with other people, it makes sense. So then you say the haftarah with the brachas afterwards. And after the bichas haftarah is over, then you say the Chatzi Kaddish. Magen Avraham says you're not supposed to be mapsik with anything major in between the kriya of the mafter and the haftarah. And a lot of shows now they do it. It's a new practice that started the last couple of years. All over the world they do it. In America, that's what they do. Because people are talking. At the end, by mafter, people are talking. So in order to get everyone's attention, so that in between the kriya of the mafter and the haftarah, so they'll announce, we're going to say the bracha for the chayalim, and tefillah l'shlom hamdina, and the mishaber for all the chayalim in the world. That's not the time. In between the kriya of the mafter and haftarah, you're not supposed to be mapsik with all of these things. That's what the Magen Avraham says. You shouldn't say Chatzi Kaddish. Not right. That's what we do on a tiny steeple. You give 3 aliyahs, and then the third Olah Torah is the mafter. You don't give 4 aliyahs. If the din would have really been a mafter, has to be a separate aliyah. You would do the same on a tiny steeple. So that's Rabbinical proof. The fact that on a tiny steeple the shlishi is mafter shows that we pass on halacha. It's a machlokes b'mor. Shows we pass on halacha l'maisa. The mafter can count as one of the aliyahs. On Shabbos and Yom Tov and Yom Kippur, we want to satisfy both opinions, so we make them after ourselves. Remember, before the whole story began, it's a colorful boss, Tzvika Reisman. He lives in Los Angeles. So he writes interesting, colorful films. He writes svarim. He likes to talk about it. So he happened to be, they honored him at Art Scroll because he gave a lot of money. So we were there. A lot of Rabbanim came to be mechaber him. He supports Torah a lot. So he wanted to give a shir in the yeshiva. So he said, Rabbi, he's a mechutna of Rabbi Goldberg. So he gave a shir in the yeshiva about the corona before it hit New York, before we knew what was happening. So he started to discuss a shaila. And then he asked me, what do I say? So I said, I don't think there's a shaila. He says, there was a company that's owned by a religious Jew where they manufactured the masks. And they had enough masks. How many masks do you need in a normal year? But now, because of the corona, the doctors and the nurses are going to need an awful lot. And everybody needed a mask. Everybody needed in order to protect themselves. So the government wanted him to keep his business open on Shabbos. He never went into the business. Everything was run by non-Jews. But you're not allowed to anything that you're not allowed to do. You're not allowed to have the non-Jews. That's something you're not permitted to have non-Jews run the business for you on Shabbos. So the shaila was, it's a suffix hakonas nefoshes. Are you permitted to violate Amira L'Nachri, to have the non-Jews run the business on Shabbos, manufacture more masks, because in order to save more lives? I said, of course you're allowed. What kind of a shaila is that? The more masks that they're going to be, the more chance there is you're going to save more Jewish lives. That's the din. A suffix, a sefer, b'koch nefesh. It's decha Shabbos, decha Yom Tov. Even if it would have been a Nisa Deraisa, you would be allowed. I thought it was a no question. He started off by giving a whole pilpul about the topic. I thought it was a no question, but it's certainly for this. Is the Shiloh one of the... I have to go to Boca, okay. Let me close with this, okay. It's interesting. All the Shilohs that came up, everything is in Shulchan Aruch. There wasn't anything new that we had to work on. These are things that we've been discussing when you learn Gemara. Once a year, one of these Shilohs comes up. Whatever Masechta you learn, one of these issues comes up. And we discuss it. we didn't just work on these topics now. We didn't have to come up with something. Let me just close with this. The Chasam Sofer has a tshuva where he raises a very serious question. More comments on Zayis HaBracha. Moshe Rabbeinu gave bracha to all the Shvatim. He said he praises Shevet Levi of Rischa Yitzor. They observed the mitzvah of Bris Milah. What do you mean? What did Shevet Levi do that the others didn't do? So the Gemara says in Yevamos, Perika Oral, towards the end of Yevamos, during the traveling the 40 years in the Midbar, the weather conditions were such that it was a slight suffix, there was a suffix sakana to perform a Bris Milah, maybe the baby would not survive. So what's the din? What do you do? So Shevet Levi ignored the suffix sakana. They were mal their babies and everybody was healthy, nothing. The other Shvatim were nervous and they didn't perform the Bris Milah. So the Chasam Sofer asked an obvious question. They had an Orthodox rabbi there, Moshe Rabbeinu. What did Moshe Rabbeinu say? If Shevet Levi is doing it, no one ever dies. So you should have insisted that for 40 years this is going on. Should have insisted that the others should also perform the Bris Milah. The answer is no. There's a suffix sakana. He should have put his foot down. He shouldn't permit Shevet Levi. They're not allowed to kill the children. What's going on over here? So some Sofer asked the question. He has a complicated answer. So the simple answer is the following. Chaim Ozer was the big posek in Europe before the Second World War. He died in the middle of the Second World War. So he has a tshuva where he quotes 5 or 6 major poskim who all say the same. The Gemara says whenever there's a suffix sakana that people are not worried about, we apply the posek in Tehillim that we have in the David. Yishan Rebsai Moshe. HaKadosh Baruch Hu protects the foolish people who are not careful in order to protect themselves. So when does that apply? Well, a guy's going to jump off the Empire State Building. Look, man, no hands. So Chaim Ozer quotes the classical poskim and say it only applies when it's a suffix sakana that's nowhere near 50-50. So anywhere near 50-50 or worse than 50-50, you're not allowed to put yourself into a situation of a suffix sakana. If it's nowhere near 50-50, so then it depends on each person. If the person who's nervous is considered a suffix sakana, but the one who's not is not. So the Chazon Ish had already moved to Eretz Yisrael before the Second World War. He moved before, and the Shaila came up. The German army wanted to take over Palestine because Eretz Yisrael is an important location. It's the link between the 3 continents, between Asia, Africa, and Europe. So whoever controls Eretz Yisrael it's relevant about controlling the rest of the 3 continents. So that when they started to try to take over Palestine, that's when they started to lose the war. And then the end was they finally lost the war. After killing so many Jews, they finally lost the war. So the shaila was, I remember when I was a little boy, we lived in Pennsylvania then. So the Nazis were not near America, but they used to have practice air raids. So they used to run a siren in the city and at night, because they were acting as if the Nazis are going to drop bombs, and they didn't have radar then. So the only way to know where to drop the bomb is the airplane is going to be above, you're going to see the lights on. So they had to turn out all the lights. So it happened a few times that the air raid was on Friday night. So you had to turn out the lights, but it wasn't a real suffix, kind of just practice. So my father was an Orthodox rabbi, so we didn't turn out the lights. So the police came and they wanted to give him a ticket. So he explained all 3 times that we're Orthodox Jews. If there would really be a suffix sakana, he would certainly turn out the lights. It's only a practice. So 2 times he got a penalty, he had to pay a knas. And once he got away with it, the policeman didn't give him a ticket. But in Eretz Yisrael, it was for real. The Nazis were surrounding Eretz Yisrael. And when the British knew that the Nazis may be bombing Eretz Yisrael, so they would sound the siren, and everybody had to turn out the lights. It was for real. It wasn't practice there. So the shaila was: you live in a little village, you hear faintly from a distance the siren ringing very far away. Is that called the suffix sakana? Are you obligated to turn out the lights where you live, or not? So the Chazon Ish, they asked the Chazon Ish told over a story that on one occasion, Chavetz Chaim visited the city lodge, and he was there for quite a few hours. And people were coming to ask him answers. They didn't really ask shilas. He wasn't known as a person, but they would ask him answers. So 2 people came an hour apart from us, and 2 people came to ask the exact same shilah. There was so much anti-Semitism, they were afraid that the day would come that they're going to kill all the Jews and start up with all the Jews. And they were Shomer Shabbos, so they didn't make so much money. If they would have had a job to work on Shabbos, they would have made more, would have been able to put away money in the savings account. So people suggested it's a suffix sakana. They should take a job to be Mechal Shabbos, so they'll make more salary, so they'll be able to save money, so that when there'll be so much anti-Semitism that they'll have to run away, they'll have money to be able to buy a train ticket to leave to save them. So they both asked the exact same shot, but not together, an hour apart from each other. So the Chofetz Chaim asked each one the exact same thing. Do you really think that that may possibly save your life? So the first one said he thinks it's a joke. He thinks that if they're going to they're going to kill him, it's not going to help. But his friends said like that. So he told them, if you don't really think that there's a chance that can save your life, then you're not allowed to do it. The next one who came an hour later, he asked him the same shot. Do you really think that may save him? He said, yeah. If I have money, I'll be able to fight it. He said, for you, it's something. But that's Rav Chaim Oizer, Paskins, it is safe. He says, we have a suffix sakana that's nowhere near 50-50. Nowhere near 50-50. And still, the Gemara says you don't go basarai, even if it's only 1% chance of the suffix sakana. It's still called the suffix sakana. So that's only if you personally are nervous. If you're not nervous, then it's not called the suffix sakana. So that's a shiloh over here. What about wearing a mask? So a lot of people say it's not. No, and if a lot of people I know died in my neighborhood, quite a few people died. People my age, but died younger, older. A lot of people died. It was nowhere near 50-50. It's not a suffix sakana 50-50. So we really ought to say, for those who are nervous, it's called the suffix sakana. For those who are not nervous, it's not called the suffix sakana. The one who is not nervous has no right. You see the Chazon Ish. So what did the Chazon Ish say? If you hear faintly from a distance, if you hear the siren going off in a distant city, what the answer is, it a suffix sakana or not? So he said, if one person in the city, you can't say whoever's nervous should turn off the lights on Friday night. Whoever's not nervous can leave the lights on. No, but the other guy is nervous. So if one person in the whole village is nervous, everybody has to turn off the lights. The same over here. If there's one person in the shul who is nervous and who insists that he wants to wear a mask, then everybody in the shul is mechuyev to wear a mask. Can't say, I'm not nervous, and Shabbat beside Hashem. If no one in the shul is nervous, then it's nowhere near 50-50, then the din is Shabbat beside Hashem. We should all be healthy for many years to come. Protect all of us. Have a good day.